The smoke rose before dawn. It climbed over the hills in dark ribbons and turned the morning sky gray before the sun could touch it. Chief Takoda stood at the edge of the canyon and watched the smoke rise from the place where his people had slept in peace only hours before. His hands were covered in dust. His chest was bare beneath the torn skin of his war shirt. Blood ran down from a cut near his temple, but he did not feel it. He did not feel the cold wind either. He did not hear the cries behind him at first. He only saw the smoke. Then he heard a woman scream his name. Takoda turned and ran. The village was broken. Lodges had fallen. Horses had scattered into the brush. The earth was marked with the tracks of many riders. The attackers had come like wolves in the darkness. They had struck fast, taken what they wanted, and left before the warriors could gather. Takoda had fought until his arms shook. He had pulled men from their horses. He had stood before the women and children with a knife in one hand and a broken spear in the other. But there had been too many, and now the silence after the attack was worse than the battle itself. He moved through the smoke with a face carved from stone. People stepped aside when they saw him. Some reached for him. Some begged for orders, but he could not answer yet. Not until he found his sons. His oldest son, Kele, had been the first to ride toward the sound of danger. Brave, proud, too quick to place himself between death and others. His younger son, Maska, had followed him with the same fire in his eyes. Takoda had raised them to protect their people. He had taught them that honor was not in the strength of the arm, but in the courage to stand when fear told a man to run. Now he feared that lesson had taken them from him. Near the dry riverbed, he saw two warriors kneeling. Takoda stopped. The world became narrow. Only the smoke. Only the riverbed. Only the two bodies lying beside the stones. He walked toward them slowly. Kele lay with his hand still closed around his knife. His face was calm, as if sleep had taken him during a hunt. Maska lay beside him, one arm thrown across his brother's chest, as though even in his last breath he had tried to protect him. Takoda dropped to his knees. No sound came from him. The women began to weep behind him. The warriors lowered their heads. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Takoda touched Kele's face first, then Maska's. His hands trembled for the first time in many years. "My sons," he whispered. The words broke inside him. He leaned forward until his forehead touched the earth between them. He did not cry like a man who wanted comfort. He cried like a mountain breaking in half, quiet, deep, terrible. His wife had died many winters ago. His sons had been the living fire she left behind. Everything he had loved of her had remained in their eyes, in their laughter, in the way they rode beside him. Now that fire had been struck down, a young warrior named Chaitan approached with careful steps. "Chief," he said softly, "we found tracks heading north. Many horses. They took food, blankets, and 2 prisoners." Takoda lifted his head. The grief in his eyes did not disappear. It hardened. "Who?" he asked. "Lena, the widow from the trading road, and the little boy she cared for." Takoda remembered Lena, a white woman who had come to the village months before after losing her husband to fever. She had been afraid at first, but his people had taken her in when no town would. The boy was not hers by blood, yet she loved him as if he had come from her own body. Takoda looked back at his sons. The attackers had not only killed, they had taken the innocent. That was not war, that was cowardice. He rose slowly. Every person in the village watched him. They expected rage. They expected a command to gather every warrior and chase the enemy until the desert ran red. But Takoda stood silent. He had seen enough death for one morning. He looked at the wounded. He looked at the children hiding behind their mothers. He looked at the old men trying to lift fallen poles with shaking hands. Then he spoke. "No warrior leaves with me unless the village can stand without him." Chaitan frowned. "You cannot go alone." Takoda turned to him. "I will not empty this place of its last protectors. They killed your sons." Takoda's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said, "and if I ride only with anger, I will bury more sons before sunset." Young warrior lowered his eyes. Takoda stepped toward the bodies of Kele and Maska. He took one feather from each of their hair and tied both to the leather band around his wrist. "I will follow them," he said. "I will bring back the prisoners. I will learn who sent these men, and I will make sure they never return to our land." An old woman named Helona came forward. Her face was lined by many seasons, and her voice carried the weight of a grandmother to the whole tribe. "Chief," she said, "your heart is wounded. A wounded heart can lose its path." Takoda looked at her. "My heart is wounded," he answered, "but my path is clear." Halona placed a small pouch of medicine herbs in his palm. "Then take this, not for revenge, for remembrance." Takoda closed his fingers around it. The sun finally rose above the hills, casting gold over the ruined village. Its light touched the faces of his sons. Takoda wanted to stay. He wanted to sit beside them until the sky turned dark again. He wanted to speak to them as he had when they were children, but somewhere beyond the northern ridge, Lena and the boy were afraid. Somewhere the men who had done this were riding with stolen lives in their hands. Takoda walked to his horse. The animal stood restless, black mane tossing in the wind. Takoda placed one hand on its neck and whispered a few words. The horse calmed beneath his touch. Chaitan came again. "Let me ride with you," Takoda studied him. Chaitan was young, but his eyes were steady. "You stay until the wounded are safe," Takoda said. "Then follow if you must. But do not chase my anger. Follow the trail." Chaitan nodded. Takoda mounted. For one moment he looked back at his people, broken, grieving, but still standing. Then his gaze moved to the smoke above the village, and beyond it to the wide northern land. He did not shout, he did not swear before the sky, he simply rode. Behind him, the village watched their chief disappear into the morning light. Before him, the trail of the enemy cut across the earth like a scar, and in his heart, beneath the grief, one promise began to burn. He would not let hatred become his master, but he would not let evil walk away untouched. The trail led north across dry hills and empty valleys. Takoda rode from sunrise until darkness covered the land. He stopped only long enough to give his horse water and study the tracks left by the raiders. There had been at least 20 men. Some rode heavy horses from the eastern settlements. Others used smaller desert horses. The tracks told a story to those who knew how to read them, and Takoda knew. One horse had stumbled several times. A prisoner. Another set of tracks was smaller. The boy. They were still alive. That thought pushed him forward. On the third day he reached a narrow canyon. The walls rose high above him like stone giants. The tracks entered the canyon, but did not leave it. Takoda dismounted. Something felt wrong. The air was too quiet. He moved carefully between the rocks. Then he saw it. A dead horse. The animal had been abandoned beside the canyon wall. Nearby lay broken ropes. Takoda knelt beside the ground. A struggle. Someone had tried to escape. His eyes followed the signs across the dirt until they stopped at a dark stain on the rocks. Blood, fresh enough to be only a day old. His jaw tightened. He followed the trail deeper into the canyon. As evening approached, he finally heard voices, men laughing, a fire crackling. Takoda climbed silently onto a ridge and looked down. The raiders had made camp below. There were 18 of them. 2 guards watched the horses. 3 others sat around the fire cleaning rifles. Near a large boulder sat Lena and the boy. Their hands were tied, but they appeared unharmed. Relief passed through Takoda like cool water. Then he saw the man giving orders. A large scar crossed the stranger's face from eye to jaw. Even from a distance he looked dangerous. The other men listened whenever he spoke, their leader. Takoda watched for a long time. A younger version of himself would have attacked immediately. But grief had taught him patience. He waited until darkness settled fully across the canyon. Then he moved, silent as a shadow. The first guard never saw him. Takoda slipped behind him and struck the man unconscious. The second guard turned at the last moment. Too late. Takoda covered his mouth and dropped him beside the first. No noise, no alarm. He reached Lena first. Her eyes widened. "Chief," she whispered. Takoda cut her ropes. "Can the boy walk?" She nodded. The child looked frightened but brave. Takoda placed a finger to his lips. The boy understood. Together they moved toward the horses. Then disaster struck. A loose stone rolled beneath the boy's foot. The sound echoed through the canyon. One of the raiders jumped to his feet. "Who's there?" Another grabbed a rifle. Within seconds, the camp exploded into chaos. Takoda pushed Lena toward the horses. "Ride south. What about you?" "Go." The scar-faced leader pointed directly at Takoda. "There he is. Gunfire erupted, bullets shattered stone around him. Takoda sprinted between rocks as men chased after him. He fired arrows from the darkness. One raider fell, then another, but there were too many. Soon he found himself surrounded near the canyon wall. The scar-faced leader stepped forward with a smile. "You must be the Apache chief." Takoda remained silent. "I heard about your sons." The smile widened. "They fought well." For a moment rage surged through Takoda's body. The man noticed. He enjoyed it. "You want revenge," the leader said. "Good, so do I." Takoda frowned. The stranger lowered his rifle. "My name is Rourke. And your sons were not my target." The words caught Takoda by surprise. "What do you mean?" Rourke laughed. "You think this attack was my idea?" "I was paid." The canyon suddenly felt colder. "Paid by who?" Takoda asked. Rourke's grin disappeared. "Find him yourself." Then he raised his rifle. Before he could fire, a shot echoed from the ridge above. One of Rourke's men collapsed. Another shot followed. Then another. Chaitin, the young warrior, had arrived. The raiders scattered in confusion. Takoda seized the moment. He lunged forward and knocked the rifle from Rourke's hands. The two men crashed into the dirt. They exchanged heavy blows. Rourke was powerful, but Takoda fought with the strength of a grieving father. At last he threw the outlaw aside. Rourke staggered backward toward a waiting horse. Their eyes met one final time. "This isn't over," Rourke shouted. Then he escaped into the darkness with several surviving men. The canyon fell silent. Chaitin climbed down from the ridge. "You told me not to follow your anger," he said. Takoda looked toward the horizon where Rourke had vanished. "And you followed the trail." Chaitin smiled. Lena and the boy were safe, but Takoda's mission had changed. Someone had hired the raiders. Someone had wanted his village destroyed. Someone had set all of this in motion. For the first time since his sons died, Takoda realized the truth. The men he fought in the canyon were only the beginning. The real enemy was still waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Takoda returned to the village with Lena, the boy, and Chaitin beside him. No one cheered when they arrived. The people were too tired for joy and too wounded for celebration. But when the mothers saw the boy alive, hope moved through the camp like a small flame in the dark. Lena slid from the horse and held the child close. Takoda watched them for a moment. Then his eyes moved to the place where his sons had been laid beneath white cloth. His steps slowed. He wanted to go to them first, but the tribe was waiting. A chief did not belong only to his grief. He stood before the council fire that night. The elders sat in silence. The warriors watched him with restless eyes. Chaitin told them what Rourke had said. The attack had been paid for. A murmur passed through the people. One old warrior struck the ground with his staff. Then this was not only murder, it was a message. Takoda nodded. "Yes. Who would pay men to attack us?" another asked. Before Takoda could answer, Lena stepped forward. Everyone turned to her. Her face was pale, but her voice did not shake. "I may know." Takoda looked at her carefully. Lena swallowed. "Before I came here, I lived near Fort Mason. A land agent named Elias Ward wanted this valley. He said the army would soon clear it for settlers. My husband worked for him once. Before he died, he told me Ward was paying outlaws to create war." The fire cracked loudly. Takoda's eyes darkened. "Why did you not speak before?" "Because I was afraid," Lena said. "And because Ward has men everywhere." A younger warrior stood. "Then we ride to Fort Mason and burn his world down." Several men agreed. Takoda raised one hand. Silence fell. "No," he said. The warrior stared at him. "He killed your sons." Takoda's face tightened with pain. "Yes, and I will not honor my sons by becoming the same kind of monster." The words struck the camp hard. Takoda looked at every face around the fire. "We will find proof. We will expose him. And if he comes for us again, we will stand together." Chaitin stepped closer. "How do we find proof?" Lena lifted her eyes. "My husband kept a ledger, names, payments, deals. I hid it before I ran." "Where?" Takoda asked. "In the old mission near the river." The room of silence grew deeper. The old mission stood close to Fort Mason, close to Ward, close to danger. Takoda looked toward the graves of his sons. He felt their absence like a blade. Then he turned back to Lena. "At dawn, we ride." Lena shook her head. "No, I ride with you. It is too dangerous. That ledger is hidden where only I can find it." Takoda studied her. She had lost much, yet she stood unbroken. For the first time since the attack, he saw not only fear in her eyes, he saw courage. At sunrise, Takoda, Lena and Chaitan left the village. Behind them, the people began to rebuild. Before them, the road to the old mission waited beneath a red sky, and somewhere near Fort Mason, Elias Ward still believed his secret was safe. The journey to the old mission took 2 days. Takoda rode ahead while Chaitan watched their tracks. Lena remained between them. The closer they came to Fort Mason, the more careful they became. On the second evening, they reached a ridge overlooking the mission. The stone building stood abandoned beside a river. Part of its roof had collapsed years ago. Weeds covered the courtyard. Lena stared at it, buried the ledger beneath the chapel floor. Takoda studied the area. Something felt wrong. There were fresh horse tracks. Someone had arrived. Recently, he raised a hand. "Wait here," Takoda moved silently toward the mission. He checked the courtyard first, then the stable. No one. Finally, he entered the chapel, dust-covered. Everything but not everywhere. Near the altar, he noticed footprints. Recent footprints. Someone had searched the building. Takoda crouched beside a loose stone in the floor. The stone had been moved before. Pulled it aside. The hiding place was empty. His heart sank. A voice suddenly echoed behind. "Him looking for something?" Takoda spun around. Rourke stood in the doorway. With 4 armed men, the outlaw smiled. "I had a feeling someone would come here." Takoda's hand moved toward his knife. Rourke laughed. "Don't. You're outnumbered." Outside, Chaitan heard the voices and immediately drew his bow. Lena's face turned pale. "It's a trap." Before anyone could move, gunfire erupted from the trees. More riders appeared, at least 10. They had been waiting. Takoda burst through a side window of the chapel as bullets shattered the walls behind him. "Ride!" he shouted. The 3 companions raced toward the river while the outlaws pursued them. Bullets struck the ground around their horses. One shot hit Chaitan's shoulder. The young warrior nearly fell. Takoda grabbed his arm and kept him in the saddle. They reached the river and crossed through deep water. The current slowed the horses but also erased their tracks. By nightfall, they escaped into the hills. A small fire burned inside a hidden canyon while Takoda treated Chaitan's wound. "It is not deep," Chaitan said through clenched teeth. "You were lucky." Lena sat quietly. Nearby, finally she spoke. "The ledger is gone." Takoda nodded. "Yes, then we have nothing." For a moment nobody spoke. Then Takoda remembered something. Nothing. The others looked at him. Rourke knew about the ledger. Chaitan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means Elias Ward is afraid." Lena slowly understood. If he stole the ledger, then the names inside it were real. Takoda stared into the fire. The proof was gone, but their enemy had revealed his fear. That was a mistake. The next morning they continued north. Near midday they encountered an old trader traveling alone with a wagon. The man recognized Lena immediately. His eyes widened. "I thought you were dead." Lena stepped forward. "Thomas, do you remember my husband?" The old trader nodded. Then his expression changed. "I remember something else too." Takoda listened carefully. "A few months before he died, your husband gave me a letter," Thomas said. "He told me to hide it. He said dangerous men were involved." Lena's eyes filled with hope. "A letter?" Thomas nodded. "I still have it." Takoda felt the first spark of victory since this journey began. Maybe the ledger was gone, but another piece of the truth still existed. And somewhere ahead, Elias Ward had no idea that his secrets were beginning to surface once again. Thomas led them to a small cabin hidden among cottonwood trees near the river. Inside, he opened an old wooden chest and removed a sealed envelope. Lena immediately recognized her husband's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The cabin became silent. She began to read. The letter contained names, dates, payments, and one signature that made her stop. Breathing for a moment, Elias Ward, the letter, described secret deals between Ward and several outlaw groups. He had been paying them to attack travelers and tribes. Then he used the fear created by those attacks to force settlers and soldiers to support his land claims. He caused all of this, Lena whispered. Takoda remained calm, but inside he felt anger rising, not only because of his sons. Dozens of innocent people had suffered because of one man's greed. Chayton leaned closer. Is this enough proof? Thomas shook his head. It proves much, but Ward has friends in Fort Mason. A letter alone may not be enough. Takoda looked out the window. There must be more. Thomas nodded. Slowly, there is. Everyone turned toward him. Ward keeps records in a safe inside his trading office. Real records. If someone found those papers, he could not escape justice. Chayton laughed. So we simply walk into Fort Mason and take them. Thomas did not smile. It will not be easy, the old trader explained that Ward employed armed guards and controlled much of the town. Many people feared him. Others depended on him. That evening, Takoda sat alone outside the cabin. The sun was disappearing beyond the hills for the first time in many days. Lena approached him quietly. You miss them, she said. Takoda knew she meant his sons every moment. Lena sat beside him. I lost my husband. I know grief changes a person. Takoda stared at the horizon. My sons should have buried me one day, not the other way around. Neither spoke for a while. Then Lena placed a hand gently on his arm. They would be proud of what you're doing. Takoda lowered his eyes. No one had spoken those words to him before. For a brief moment, some of the weight on his heart felt lighter. The next morning, they left for Fort Mason. By sunset, they reached a ridge overlooking the town. Smoke rose from chimneys, wagons moved through the streets, and in the center stood the largest building in town, Ward Trading Company. Chayton pointed toward it. There, Takoda studied the building carefully. Guards stood outside more than he expected. Then something caught his attention. A familiar horse, black scarred Rourke's horse. The outlaw was inside. Takoda's eyes narrowed. Rourke and Ward were meeting. At that very moment, the men responsible for his sons' deaths were together under the same roof. Chayton reached for his bow. We can end this tonight. Takoda thought of his sons. He thought of revenge. Then he thought of his people waiting at home. No, he said, we end it the right way. Far below, lights began to appear inside Ward's office. The hunt was almost over, but the most dangerous part had only just begun. That night, Takoda and Chayton entered Fort Mason after dark. Lena remained with Thomas outside town. The fewer people involved, the safer it would be. The streets were nearly empty. Most of the town slept, while a few lanterns still burned near the saloon and trading office. Takoda moved through the shadows. He and Chayton reached the rear of Ward's building unnoticed. A small window stood open. Voices drifted from inside. Takoda carefully looked through the glass. Ward and Rourke sat across from each other at a large desk. Between them lay maps and stacks of papers. You promised this would be finished, Ward said angrily. Rourke shrugged. The Apache chief survived. Ward slammed his fist onto the table. Then kill him. Takoda's eyes hardened. Rourke leaned back. It won't be easy. He's smarter than most men. Ward opened a drawer and removed a thick ledger. If he finds this, we're both finished. Takoda exchanged a glance with Chayton. The ledger existed. The proof was real. Inside the office, Ward locked the ledger inside a heavy safe hidden behind a painting. Then both men left the room. Takoda waited. Minutes passed. Finally, he slipped through the window. The office was empty. He crossed the room and examined the safe. Strong steel, locked. Chayton frowned. Can you open it? Takoda shook his head. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside. The two men froze. A guard entered carrying a lantern. Takoda stepped behind the door. As the guard walked past, Takoda struck him and lowered him silently to the floor. Chayton quickly found the key ring on the man's belt. One key opened the safe. Inside lay dozens of documents, land contracts, payment records, letters, and a ledger filled with names. Takoda gathered everything. At that moment, a shout erupted outside. The unconscious guard had been discovered. Someone's in the office. The alarm spread through town. Takoda and Chayton ran for the window. Gunshots followed immediately. Glass exploded behind them. The streets filled with armed men. Stop them. Takoda and Chayton raced through alleys toward the edge of town. But more riders appeared ahead. Ward had prepared for trouble. They were trapped. Then a rifle cracked from a rooftop. One of the pursuing men fell, another shot followed. Lena, she had come anyway. From above, she created just enough confusion. Takoda and Chayton broke through the line and reached their horses. The three escaped into the darkness. By dawn, they were miles from Fort Mason. Safe, exhausted, alive. Takoda opened the stolen ledger beside the morning fire. He turned page after page. The evidence was overwhelming. Then he found something unexpected. A final payment record. Recent. Very recent. His eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Lena asked. Takoda handed her the book. She read the entry and gasped. The payment for the attack on his village had been made only 2 days before, which meant something impossible. The order to attack had been given before anyone knew Takoda's sons would die. Ward had not wanted revenge. He had wanted the entire tribe destroyed, every man, every woman, every child, for a piece of land. Takoda slowly closed the ledger. His grief remained. But now he finally knew the truth, and soon the whole territory would know it too. Takoda returned to his village carrying the ledger. The people gathered as he entered the camp. Many expected news of war. Instead, Takoda brought the truth. That evening, he sat before the council fire and showed the documents to the elders. Every payment, every signature, every order. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, an elder named Nodin shook his head. "All these deaths for land," Takoda nodded. "Yes." Word spread quickly through the village. Anger followed. Several warriors demanded immediate revenge. "Let us ride tonight. Let us burn Ward's ranch. Let him feel our pain." Takoda listened carefully. Once he might have agreed. Once grief might have controlled him. But something had changed. "My sons died protecting our people," he said. "I will not dishonor them by leading our children into another war." The camp slowly became quiet. Then a scout rode into the village at full speed. His horse was exhausted. The man's face carried fear. "Chief." Takoda stepped forward. "What happened?" The scout swallowed hard. "Rourke is coming." A murmur spread through the crowd. "How many?" Chayton asked. "More than 40 riders." The village froze. That was enough men to destroy what remained of the tribe. Takoda immediately understood. Ward knew the ledger had been stolen, and now he wanted to erase every witness. The chief began giving orders. Women and children were moved into the canyon shelters. Food and water were hidden. Warriors prepared defensive positions along the ridges. No one panicked, but everyone understood the danger. As night approached, Lena found Takoda standing alone near the graves of his sons. The wind moved softly through the grass. "They're coming because of us," she said. Takoda shook his head. "No." He looked toward the village. "They are coming because evil men believe fear makes people surrender." Lena stepped closer. "And if they attack?" Takoda looked at the feathers tied around his wrist. "The feathers of his sons. Then we stand." The next morning the enemy arrived. Dust filled the horizon. Dozens of riders approached. At their front rode Rourke. The scar across his face seemed darker than ever. He stopped outside bow range and raised one hand. "I came to make an offer." Takoda rode forward alone. The two men faced each other. Rourke pointed toward the village. "Give me the ledger." Takoda remained silent. "Give it to me and I leave." Neither man believed the lie. Takoda's eyes narrowed. "If I surrender it, more villages will burn." Rourke smiled. "Then many people will die today." For a moment neither moved. Then Takoda noticed something strange. Several riders behind Rourke looked nervous, uncertain, not loyal. Mercenaries, men fighting for money. An idea formed in his mind. Takoda raised his voice. "Do you know why you were hired?" Some riders exchanged glances. Rourke's smile disappeared. Takoda continued. "He paid you to murder women and children." More uneasy looks followed. "He paid you because he is afraid of the truth." Rourke grabbed his rifle. Enough. But doubt had already spread. Takoda saw it, a crack inside the enemy ranks. The battle had not begun, yet Rourke was already losing control. As both sides returned to their positions, Chaitin approached. What now? Takoda looked across the valley. We survive today. And tomorrow? Takoda stared at the enemy camp. Tomorrow we make sure Ward can never hurt anyone again. As darkness fell, fires appeared across the valley. Two sides waited for sunrise, one fighting for greed, the other fighting for home. And Takoda knew the final confrontation was very close. The attack came at sunrise. Rourke's riders charged across the valley expecting fear and confusion. Instead they found preparation. Takoda had spent the entire night positioning his warriors among the rocks and ridges above the village. When the Taiko first riders entered the valley, arrows rained down from both sides. Several horses turned back immediately. Others crashed into hidden obstacles placed during the night. The attack slowed, then stopped. Rourke shouted orders and pushed his men forward. But something unexpected happened. Many of the hired riders hesitated. The words Takoda had spoken the day before had spread through the camp. Some now understood they were not fighting a war. They were helping a greedy businessman destroy innocent people. One group simply rode away. Rourke cursed as he watched them leave. His force was shrinking. Takoda saw it too. He rode along the ridge encouraging his warriors. Hold your ground. The battle continued through the morning. Neither side gained a clear advantage. Then a rider arrived from Fort Mason carrying urgent news. He raced directly into Rourke's camp. Minutes later, chaos erupted among the outlaws. Rourke mounted his horse and immediately began retreating. Takoda watched carefully. Something had changed. Very quickly, Chaitin rode up beside him. What happened? The answer arrived soon enough. The messenger had been captured by two Apache scouts. Inside his saddlebag they found a letter. Takoda read it. His eyes widened. Elias Ward had been arrested. Thomas and several honest townspeople had delivered copies of the evidence to a federal judge visiting a nearby settlement. The judge had issued warrants. Soldiers were already moving toward Fort Mason. Ward's empire was collapsing. Rourke knew it. Without Ward's money, he was finished. The outlaw gathered his remaining loyal men and fled north. The battle ended almost instantly. Cheers spread through the village. For the first time since the attack weeks earlier, hope returned, but Takoda remained silent. Rourke had escaped. The man responsible for killing his sons was still free. That night, a celebration began around the council fire. Food was shared. Children laughed again. Yet Takoda sat apart from the crowd. Lena found him near the river. You should be celebrating. Takoda stared at the water. Ward will face justice. Yes, but my sons are still gone. Lena sat beside him. For a while neither spoke. Then she gently took his hand, not as a lover, not yet, simply as someone who understood loss. Takoda looked at her. The sadness remained in both their eyes. But there was something else now. Trust, a bond forged through hardship. Before either could speak, Chaitin appeared. His expression was serious. Chief, Takoda stood immediately. What is it? The scouts found Rourke's trail. The young warrior pointed north. He is heading into the mountains. Takoda looked toward the dark horizon. The hunt was not over. One final journey remained, one final reckoning. And deep inside, Takoda knew that when he faced Rourke again, he would have to choose between revenge and the honor his sons had died defending. At dawn, Takoda left the village with Chaitin and 6 trusted warriors. Lena watched them ride away. Part of her wanted to follow, but she knew this journey belonged to Takoda. The trail led deep into the northern mountains where steep cliffs and narrow passes made travel dangerous. For 3 days, they followed Rourke's tracks. On the 4th morning, a scout returned with news. We found them. Takoda immediately gathered the group. Rourke and his remaining men had taken shelter inside an abandoned mining camp hidden between 2 cliffs. There was only one entrance, a perfect place for a final stand. As the warriors studied the camp from above, Chaitin pointed toward the buildings. There. Rourke stood outside one of the cabins. Even from a distance he looked tired. His gang was smaller now. Many had abandoned him after learning the truth about Ward. Only his most loyal followers remained. Takoda could have attacked immediately, Instead, he chose another path. He rode alone into the valley. The outlaws quickly aimed their rifles. Rourke stepped forward. "You came." Takoda stopped several yards away. "I came to end this," Rourke laughed. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." "Maybe." The outlaw studied him. "You're not here for justice. You're here because of your sons." Takoda said nothing. The words hurt because they were true. Rourke slowly nodded. "I know what loss feels like." Takoda frowned. For the first time, the outlaw's confidence faded. "Years ago, soldiers burned my family's ranch during a border conflict. Nobody paid for it. Nobody cared." His eyes darkened. "I became what I hated." For a brief moment, Takoda almost pitied him. Almost. Then he remembered the graves of Kele and Maska. "You had a choice," Takoda said. "Everyone has a choice." Rourke looked away. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then a nervous outlaw suddenly fired his rifle. The shot shattered the silence. Everything exploded into action. Warriors rushed down from the cliffs. Outlaws returned fire. The battle spread through the mining camp. Takoda and Rourke found themselves facing each other once more. This time there was no escape. No interruptions. No running. They fought hand to hand among the abandoned buildings. Both men were exhausted. Both carried scars from the past. But only one fought for something greater than himself. At last, Takoda knocked Rourke to the ground. His knife rested against the outlaw's throat. The battle around them faded. This was the moment he had imagined 100 times. The man responsible for his sons' deaths lay helpless before him. One movement, 1 second, and it would be over. Rourke looked up. "Do it." Takoda's hand tightened. He saw Keel. He saw Maska. He saw their smiles. Then he remembered the lesson he had taught them since childhood. Honor before anger. Always. Slowly, Takoda lowered the knife. Rourke stared at him in disbelief. "You won't kill me?" Takoda stepped back. "No." The outlaw looked confused. "Why?" Takoda's voice remained steady. "Because my sons were better men than that." Moments later, the fighting ended. The surviving outlaws surrendered. Rourke was taken prisoner. As soldiers from Fort Mason arrived to take custody of him, the outlaw looked at Takoda one final time. "You won." Takoda shook his head. "No." He looked toward the sky. "The day my sons died, nobody won." With the battle over, the warriors began the journey home. But Takoda knew one final chapter still remained. Not a chapter of war, a chapter of healing. The journey home felt different. For the first time since the attack, Takoda did not ride. With anger in his heart, Rourke was gone. Elias, Ward would spend the rest of his life answering for his crimes. The threat to the tribe had ended, yet the empty place left by Kele and Maska remained. Some wounds never completely disappeared. When Takoda returned to the village, the people gathered to welcome him. Children ran through the camp. Women smiled. The elders stood proudly near the council fire. The tribe was alive. That alone was a victory. That evening a great feast was held. Stories were shared. Songs filled the air. For the first time in many weeks, laughter returned to the village. As the celebration continued, Takoda quietly slipped away. His feet carried him to the hill overlooking the camp, to the place where his sons rested. The moon shone softly over the graves. Takoda knelt between them. For a longer time he said nothing. Then he spoke. "I could not bring you home." The wind moved gently through the grass, but I kept my promise. His voice grew softer. "Our people are safe." He placed a hand on each grave. "You would be proud of them." A voice behind him broke the silence. "They would be proud of you too." Takoda turned. Lena stood nearby. She walked to his side and looked at the graves with respect. For a moment neither spoke. Then Takoda smiled for the first time in many months. A real smile, not one forced for the tribe, not one hidden behind grief. A genuine smile, Lena noticed. "So it still exists?" Takoda laughed quietly. "What?" "Your smile." The two sat together beneath the stars. The pain remained, but it no longer controlled them. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The village slowly healed. New lodges were built, fields were planted. Children played where fear had once lived. Dakota continued leading, his people with wisdom and strength. Lena remained in the village. At first she stayed because she had nowhere else to go. Later she stayed because she wanted to. Friendship grew, then something deeper. Neither rushed it. Both had known loss, both understood the value of patience. One spring morning, the entire tribe gathered beside the river. Flowers covered the valley. The mountains stood bright beneath the sun. Dakota and Lena stood together before the people. The old woman, Helena, smiled knowingly. She had seen this coming long ago. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no great display. Only two hearts choosing to walk the same path. When it ended, the tribe celebrated once more. This time there were tears of happiness. As the sun began to set, Dakota stood overlooking the valley with Lena beside him. Children laughed nearby. Smoke rose peacefully from the lodges. Life had returned. Lena slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" Dakota looked toward the horizon, then toward the village, finally toward the graves on the distant hill. "I am thinking about my sons." Lena squeezed his hand. Gently, Dakota smiled. "I think they would like this view." The wind carried the scent of spring across the valley. For the first time in a very long time, the future felt brighter than the past. The attack that had nearly destroyed the tribe had instead united it. The grief that had nearly broken Dakota had taught him compassion. And the journey that began with loss had ended with hope. As darkness settled over the valley, the chief, who had once ridden into the wilderness seeking revenge, stood surrounded by family once more. Not the family he had lost, but the family life had given him. And under a sky full of stars, peace finally found him again.